Hey, everybody. Really excited to kick things off here. We hope you're all doing well. By way of introduction, my name's Adam Herwagen, and I'm on the team here at Slow Ventures. Before we get started, want to just clear a few quick housekeeping items. First of all, if you have any questions, we totally encourage you to ask them. Just please use the Q&A panel on the bottom of your Zoom. And you can ask or upvote any questions there, and moderators will answer as time permits. Secondly, we'll be recording this entire conference today, so don't worry if you have to skip out for 30 or only can make a part. I'll distribute a full recording of the conference as well as a highlight reel afterward. And then finally, want to recognize that there are a lot more important issues going on right now. And that being said, while today is completely free admission, we strongly encourage you to donate to one of 3 charities that we think are making a positive difference towards some of those issues. And I'll follow up with an easy way to learn about them and donate to them after the conference. With that, really excited to welcome up Jill Carlson and Adam Leibovitz from the SLOW team to sort of kick things off on the day. And provide a little context on some of the work we've been doing on the pet space. Jill and Adam, do you want to come up?
Hi there. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us today. As Adam mentioned, my name is Jill. I'm a principal on the investing team at SLOW. This is Matilda. As you can see, this topic hits very close to home for me as the proud new owner of a puppy. But more importantly, for those who don't know, SLOW Ventures is an early stage venture fund. We're based in San Francisco. And while we don't often have sort of specific theses about different industries or verticals when we start investing out of a fund, always as we look back, we see themes that have arisen, and the pet space has been one of those themes. So we decided what better way to dive into that and celebrate it with many others than by hosting a conference today, featuring some of our portfolio, but also many whom we've grown to know and respect in the space outside of our portfolio as well. So I've been working with Adam, who I'll hand it over to in a moment, to develop a bit of a thesis, and he's going to share a bit more about that with you right now. So Adam, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jill. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Pets, a peek inside the pet boom. It's a SLOW Ventures digital conference on the future of the pet industry. As Jill said, my name's Adam Leibovitz. I'm a recent MBA grad from the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth, and I've been interning with SLOW since the winter. First and foremost, we want to hope you feel safe and heard in the current moment. We recognize the severe reckoning that our country is facing right now, and I and everyone at SLOW stands in solidarity with the Black community. Over the last few months, our country has faced a lot of pain, from police brutality to the COVID-19 pandemic. We hope to play a meaningful part in harnessing this moment as a catalyst for positive action. On a much lighter note, we turn to pets. Pet ownership has been on the rise for decades, up 56% since 1988, now reaching the point where more households have pets than children. By 2016, the global pet care market had grown to an estimated $131.7 billion and is projected to grow north of $250 billion by 2025. Growth is driven by an increase in aging owners. 40% of those 70 plus now own a pet. Millennial owners, with 7 in 10 owning a pet, and an increase in multi-pet, multicultural, and Hispanic pet households. Recently, COVID-19 has catalyzed even further growth, spiking adoption rates nationwide and causing cities such as New York to run short on foster animals. In addition to the macro trends driving growth, we've also seen a clear shift in sentiment around pets and pet ownership. While historically pets were viewed as, and legally pets still are, considered property, their owners now consider them to be members of the family. Younger owners in particular treat pet ownership as a training ground for raising children, with 82% of millennials believing that to be the case. This shift in sentiment is what makes pet spending recession-proof and has been one of the primary drivers of innovation, particularly in pet care, pet health, and pet food and nutrition. So with the growing customer base and sentiment shifts that should drive spending, there's understandably been excitement and activity in the space. First, Chewy redefined pet e-commerce. Then on-demand services like Wag and Rover emerged, and subsequently a new generation of pet food and toy companies rode the direct-to-consumer and subscription box wave into the pet industry. But what's coming next? Today's panels, we're looking forward to hearing from investors and operators who live and breathe the pet industry. We'll dive into the impacts of COVID-19 on the pet industry, the changes it's caused, and what of those changes we can expect to remain when the virus subsides. Then we'll listen to a conversation on the future of the pet service marketplaces and where there may be opportunity moving forward. After a quick break, we'll chat about pet food and nutrition and how increasing owner concern regarding the health and wellness of their pets has and will drive innovation in the space. And finally, we'll wrap up the day with a discussion on the future of pet veterinary care, including the pros and cons of telehealth and digitally native practices and how those will influence the future of pet healthcare. I hope you're all as excited for the coming conversations as we are. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to Kevin, who will help us dive into the COVID and its impact on the pet industry.
Smooth transitions. Thanks, guys. Do we have the rest of the panel present? There we go. There's John, Myka, and Sophie. There we go. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Kevin Colleran. I am one of the managing directors at SLO. I typically am Boston-based, but currently living in Maine during all this craziness. And I've been active in leading a bunch of our pet investments over the years, some of which are talking today, others, but others not. But this is not a specific thing about SLO. This just, again, as Jill mentioned, is really about us looking at themes that are taking off and trying to bring together these conferences around these various micro themes. So first, panel is related to COVID, related to kind of, as Adam mentioned, the increase in pet ownership as a result of kind of the stay in place and work from home measures. And so we have John from Companion, Sophie from Fable, and Myka from Good Pup. And if really quick, we could each just do a quick introduction of yourselves and kind of what your businesses do, and then we can jump into the impacts of the last 3-4 months of COVID, the good and the bad and the unexpected. So John, you're at the top of my screen. You want to go first?
Sure. I'm John. Good to talk to you all. Thanks for tuning in. So by background, I'm actually an engineer, mechanical, aeronautical, and systems. Spent some years at Bain & Company in San Francisco. Had some fun. I got lucky at a couple of deep tech startups early on, and was at Google for a handful of years before joining Companion. At Google, I worked in kind of product and BD, working with the early research units like Axe, like research, the machine learning division, working with teams like TensorFlow, and I spent a ton of time on the Google robotics side. And at Companion, we've built a box that can give you superpowers with the animals you love. So we can automatically train behaviors to the sound of your own voice to professional levels. And all the behaviors that get dogs adopted, help them stay adopted, and that make you feel great about the bond you have with your animal. We're a small team out of San Francisco. And that, I guess what we're most excited about is the idea that because all animals communicate primarily with movement and posture, like tons of conscious and unconscious communications, and we have all this new technology that can perfectly sense that communication, and we think we're going to much better understand animals in the near future, and we're excited to be part of that.
Cool. Thank you. Sophie, do you want to tell us what you and the team are doing at Fable?
Yeah, absolutely. So by way of background, I come more from the finance and startup world. So I've been on the venture sides for about 3.5-4 years now, and before that had started another company, another startup in a totally different space in data visualization software. So it's far from sort of pet gear as you can imagine. And now I'm the co-founder of Fable. We're a product innovation company focused on all the essentials that pets use all day, every day. So finding ways to create IP through thoughtful design of physical products. So things like leashes, collars, beds, bowls, crates, all the kind of physical gear that pets use and their owners use and need throughout the day. We're primarily direct to consumer business, selling almost exclusively online, although branching out a little bit in terms of different distribution channels. That's obviously helped us quite a bit during this time of COVID and quarantine, being primarily online. So yeah, excited to be here, excited to talk more about pets and the way that we think products have been impacted by all of this.
Cool, thank you. And Myka, Good Pup.
Hi, my name is Myka Adler. Quick background on me is that I used to be a full-time academic. I was a computer science professor at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. After I got tenure there, I had a sabbatical and used the sabbatical to start my first company and got totally hooked on entrepreneurship. I'm now on company number 6, and I've been lucky enough to have some nice exits along the way as well. All very sort of technology driven, a lot of advertising, technology, digital marketing type things in the past. And about 3 years ago, got interested in the pet space, went on to found and serve as the CEO of Good Pup. Good Pup is a Boston area company, so glad to hear, Kevin, that you're sort of local sometimes at least. And what we do is dog training. Our specific approach is that we do dog training over video chat. We provide one-on-one dog training through this medium. And basically what we've done is we've combined the latest dog training methods with a whole bunch of technology, as well as a very data-driven approach to the whole dog training space. And what this has allowed us to do is produce a product that is higher quality, more convenient, and more cost-effective than any of the traditional methods that are out there. We have a network of trainers now across the United States, all of whom work out of their own homes, always have, even before COVID. And we've now trained tens of thousands of dogs through our platform. You can check us out by downloading the app. It's free to download, even free to do your first week, so you can check us out that way. But I think what you'll see if you download it is just how much the consumers really love the product. We have a 4.9 out of 5-star rating in the iOS App Store. And the other thing I'll mention is this is sort of the first step in a broader roadmap. Really what we want to be is the #1 destination for advice, community, and content for all things having to do with dogs. And the idea here is that really this is sort of the wedge in to capture the consumer right at the most leveraged point in the development of the relationship with their dog. And we're having a lot of fun, and obviously COVID has had a big impact on the business as well.
Thanks. Let's keep going with you on that. So take us into that. Obviously, I'm sure this audience is majority, many founders themselves, some investors and some pet lovers. But take us through the kind of end of February, early March, how you were planning, how the business was working, and then how things have changed since then, the good and the bad.
Yeah. So the business was doing quite well, let's say through February, March. We've sort of been growing 15-20% month over month, which at the time we thought was a nice growth rate. We were reasonably happy with that. And then, of course, March happened, and it was interesting. There was definitely some concern about the impact of the economy, and like as has already been mentioned a couple of times, our space is relatively recession-proof. But we did see initially we saw some impact of the economy, but very quickly it became obvious that this was actually very, very good for our business. And on the demand side, the consumer side, I think we were hit by a couple of things. One is just the huge influx of new dogs that have been purchased during this time. The other thing is that we were actually, just by dumb luck, incredibly well set up for exactly the situation that everybody found themselves in during this time. All of our trainers worked from home. The whole idea was to allow a dog owner to train from their house and be able to do things. We didn't call it that when we were doing this, when we introduced the product 2 years ago, but do things in a socially distanced way. So we were very well set up. And if I look at the, let's say our revenue numbers, really sort of any of the metrics, compare February to what we'll do this month, we've grown by about 6x in terms of scale. So it's been a really interesting time. Obviously, a lot of craziness when you're scaling at that pace, but we've managed to keep the quality high and customers happy through all that scaling.
Great. Yeah. I mean, unexpected, but it's been fascinating. I mean, Sophie, we speak more often, so I know how crazy things have been for you. But you want to talk about how things are now and what you wish you knew back in March, and what it was like for 3 months to try to keep up with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much to talk about. I think when we say COVID-19 and the effect that it's had on businesses and our space in particular, we can parse out, there's quarantine, the stay in place orders for the last 3 months. That's one piece. There's COVID-19 generally and the effect that it's going to have on businesses and our space longer term. And then, of course, there's the economic slowdown and the impacts of the economic repercussions on customers. I think we're probably going to get to the latter two later. So focusing a little bit more on the last 3 months in quarantine and what that impact has had, I think is interesting. It has just absolutely blown me away every day. It is a shock at how much a boom there's been since March. When we first started seeing that things were changing, we went into super conservative lockdown mode, assuming nobody's spending any money. There's going to be a massive downturn, and we're going to see a lot of negative growth. And it's constantly shocking how much growth we've seen since mid-March. And I think a lot of that comes down to trends that are, I'm sure everyone is familiar with. When people are staying at home with their pets more, they're putting more emphasis on their pets. They're very top of mind to them. They're really prioritizing their pets. People shopping for home products more in particular because they're at home more and trying to make their spaces more comfortable for both them and their pets. And then, we, again, have focused a lot more on creating actual product innovation in this space, so creating products that you can't find anywhere else. We happen to have had a product that launched in the middle of this, so early April, which was not obviously couldn't have anticipated what was happening. And it's an out-of-home product, so it's a walking system that has a bunch of really amazing features that I'm happy to talk to anybody about. It's super, super cool and very different from anything else you can find in the market. But of course, we were very nervous about launching a out-of-home product in the middle of quarantine when everybody's stuck at home. But I think one thing we've seen, obviously, is because walking your dog is such a unique activity in this world, it's such a highlighted and special moment for people, because it has, in a lot of places, particularly urban areas, been the only time you do get to get outside, that it actually, I think, for a combination of reasons. One is it's an amazing product and we are very excited about it, but also given the moment, just we saw an incredible reaction to launching that product, even in the midst of all this. I think there are also a ton of other factors for e-commerce businesses that are super relevant, because there's a lot less competition for advertising dollars. There's a lot more opportunity for growth right now. People aren't spending money on other categories, so they have a lot more opportunity to be spending in the pet space. They're not going to PetSmart, obviously, because they can't. So online businesses are getting a boom in the product space. So yeah, I think there are a ton of factors over the past 3 months that have been really, really supportive of growth. And then, we're obviously super mindful going forward about what trends we expect to see once people are getting out of quarantine and out of once stay at home is over, and those issues like price sensitivity and just general COVID related concerns that aren't necessarily about this specific aspect of the pandemic, which is people being at home with their pets, how that's going to impact things.
Are you seeing the question that's being asked in here? Or is that?
Oh no.
You kind of were. I didn't know if you were reading at the same time. It was kind of addressing the same type of thing, asking about other e-commerce opportunities that you're exploring and commission programs, and or directly with publishers.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, our biggest challenge right now is keeping up with demand, even without exploring other opportunities. So we haven't put a lot of thought into, I mean, we put thought into it, but we haven't really started aggressively pursuing any other channels, just because our organic growth and our growth from sort of more traditional marketing has so exceeded our expectations that right now the focus is meeting that demand versus generating more demand.
John, thank you. John, tell us how your world has changed in the last 3 months, for the good or bad.
Oh, so much, including a 4-month-old at home. But
perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly. I had a fractured elbow mountain biking last week. All good times. But
with the 4-month, not the 4-month-old.
Not the 4-month-old.
Okay.
That would be bad. I wouldn't be alive. My wife would make sure of that by now. Okay. There's probably 2 big things. One is just like, if you're moving physical goods, if you're manufacturing real things, like you had to be really thoughtful in the last 6 months to make sure that you were still completely operational. So I'm super proud of our team. Like we located at a California CM. We're actually producing units like 10 miles from our house, which is super fun. 2 is, I think, just I guess maybe to Myka's point, like we were super fortunate in this. Like we have our product is universally valuable. Actually, one of our board members, Ben Jacobs, who I think is a speaker later on, like said it in a really eloquent way once, which is like our product is an insanely well-behaved dog and well-trained dog. It's also a dog that's less anxious, and that's universally valuable. It's valuable to a variety of segments. Probably 7 or 8 discrete ones, everything from like working dog, service dog, scent detection dog, shelters, vets, in-home. And what we've seen from our partners is that some of those partners have just gotten so severely impacted. I mean, the Petcos, the PetSmarts of the world, the dog daycares of the world, like I feel for them. I feel terrible. I think their business model is gonna materially change moving forward. I'm not an expert, but it seems like it might. On the flip side of that, there's a massively increased need in some segments. There's some segments remain stable, like military, scent detection, all that stuff. Like that's not going away. And then in some segments, like we can, for whatever reason, we set out to do training like no one else has done it before. And we have this phenomenal side effect of the device, which is that seems to be to treat separation anxiety, which is I'm talking with experts. You guys all probably know it better than I do, but it affects something like 15 to 30 million dogs in the US, and like roughly 4 million dogs are on drugs to deal with it. For whatever reason, our product has a phenomenal effect on those dogs. And so like what we're seeing from the market is this massively increased need to help with that in a cost-effective, in a way that doesn't involve drugs ideally, and in a way that can maintain separation. Like not having a behaviorist in your home, that kind of thing. So what it's meant for us is we're trying to help as much as we can the segments that are really impacted, and we're also trying to service as quickly as we can the segments that all of a sudden got this massively increased need because of COVID. So yeah, I think we were just really lucky in the product, and also really lucky we're still pretty small, pretty early, so we were able to pivot pretty fast.
So we have obviously, investments in a whole bunch of categories unrelated to pets, and some of them, took this as very hard in terms of their business models. Others have had what may be or may not be temporary big bumps in business, meal delivery, things like that. With your sector, these dogs that have all been purchased in the last 90 days aren't going anywhere. So this is real category. Creation of a whole bunch of new customers. Do you think this just keeps going? Do you think this was a moment in time and now it's going to level off? Do you think, and I think, similarly, are these new pet owners going to act like what your customers were before, or do you think the whole sector has now moved and people spending much more time with their dogs and all this concern about, or not this concern, but people just spending more time in home and away from offices, and is this permanent, and how much do you think this changes what was the norm?
Sure, you want me to chip in on
that?
that?
Just keep going with you since you're already going.
Yes. The hypothesis around like a more of a work from home culture in the US completely makes sense to me. I'm not an expert on it, but I believe that our whole company is now working from home. I think that it does change a lot of things for us, actually in quite positive ways. For a handful of different reasons. One, we can help. There's very pressing problems we can help. Separation anxiety being number one. Number two is there's a ton of very energetic dogs with their people at home. Like the people would love to engage their dog, love to interact with their dog, but they also got to be on teleconference calls, so we can help with that. I think that fundamentally changes. And third, which I have a hypothesis on, but I don't have a ton of data yet, is I think we are going to see people spend more time and money on services in the future, because they are spending more time with their animals and realizing kind of sometimes how bored their animal may be, or spending more, or confronting issues like they have an anxiety condition or other issue. They are more likely to notice it, or more likely to have a lot of touch points on it. So they're more likely to want to take care of it or treat it. So I think those are going to be, I think it's a little soon to conclude that, but that's kind of what I'm expecting moving forward. But we'll see. I think it is going to be a new, I think there's definitely gonna be some change. I think it's headed in that direction. We'll see over time.
Myka, same to you. How permanent is the changes you've seen recently, and does this go on forever? And are these new owners to be like old dog owners, or is this a whole new era?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine the country, or really the world, going through what we've gone through the last 3 or 4 months without there being significant change to just the way that people live their lives. And I think the perfect example is the one you already brought up, which is the work from home culture. And we've already seen several very high profile announcements of permanent changes to how that works. And I think that trickles down to how people interact with the various different providers of the things they need, not just in the dog space, but more generally. You're not stopping by the store to pick something up on the way home from work. And I strongly believe that that's going to be a permanent change. As far as how that impacts us, one of the sort of core theses of the company was that there was sort of this ongoing transition, not just in terms of e-commerce, but also services that were going from doing sort of in a traditional face-to-face way, where you go to a store or somebody comes to your house, and doing these in a much more distributed, digitally enabled fashion. And I think what the last several months have done is they've taken a trend that was already happening. It was very much in the works, and they've accelerated it, right? Instead of this transition taking place over many years, it took place over a few months, or at least a big chunk of the path that was going to take place over several years happened in a few months. So I think sort of the shift in attitudes and the willingness to do things over video chat the way that we do has increased significantly. And as I look at our metrics, satisfaction metrics, and retention rates and things like that, even as the world has started to open up over the last few months, the last month, let's say, we haven't really seen a deterioration in these metrics back to where they were prior to COVID. So I think a lot of what has happened will stay. I don't think the rate of new puppy purchasing will continue at the rate that it has been over the last 3 months. I think that probably goes back to something closer to what it was pre-COVID. But even there, little hard to predict.
And just before we go to Sophie for the last, there was a question for you just on the methodology that your app uses and how you source your trainers.
Oh, great. So the methodology it's all positive reinforcement. What we've tried to do is take sort of the latest thinking, the latest science around training, and combine that with a very data-driven approach. We've done tens of thousands of sessions with trainers and dogs now, and we've used that data to figure out exactly the right specifics of the approaches, even what the curriculum looks like, and also to help sort of refine the training staff that we have. So combination of cutting edge dog training and data-driven based on what we're seeing from the results of the actual training that we do. And in terms of sourcing the trainers, a lot of it has come from word of mouth, just existing trainers telling their friends. We do advertise on a few job boards and things like that, but we have a pretty stringent vetting process. and then they go through a training program, both to make sure that they're training using the methodology that we've put together, but also just very comfortable with the technology that is required to go through the platform.
Thank you. Sophie, for last, end it with you, but I think there's another question just popped in that's actually aligned with what we were about to talk about, which is specific to kind of, you have a physical product, you need time to manufacture it, you need to put in orders, and you're already overwhelmed with and inundated with orders and trying to keep supply. How do you, and the question specifically says, and the high unemployment, uncertain economic outlook in the future, how certain can you be that you should be stocking up, and being able to predict how consistent this new order volume will be for you in the future?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously that's extremely topical and top of mind for us. And in terms of whether or not we think this is a new normal and whether or not sort of how we project this current environment forward, I do agree with John and Myka to some extent. I think, there's not going back to complete normal. These dogs have been adopted, so there's that element of the boom has already happened to some extent, and people will be dealing with that additional growth in this space. And if we do see work from home continue going forward, which I think there's still a question mark in my mind of how pervasive that's going to be on sort of a broad cultural level, I do actually think we'll probably see that puppy adoption rate stay elevated, not to where it has been the last few months, but I think we'll probably still see some elevation. That's not something we're banking on, but I could certainly see it happening, that work from home becomes more of a cultural norm, and then that leads to more adoption. But in terms of, what sort of caused the adoption rates to spike, I don't know if we can fully attribute it to work from home. I think because we saw a lot of the spike early on, there's some of that it's convenient to adopt a puppy at home and you have time to take care of it. I think there's also this big element of this is a really stressful, upsetting time, and people are looking for comfort and connection and ways to, get a little bit of positivity into their lives. And I think that extends beyond quarantine. That's a COVID effect, but not a stay-at-home effect, if that makes sense. So I do think we'll probably continue to see a lot of activity in this space and a lot of enthusiasm from consumers in this space. In terms of how it impacts us, we haven't, as Myka said, we haven't really seen a reversion in the last month or so since things have started to open up a little bit. In fact, we've seen the reverse, just like a ton of enthusiasm. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we're very focused on problem solving. So, we have this mantra of don't just make stuff solve problems, and very focused on all the problems that pet owners and pets have. And I think that is really important, particularly for new pet owners who, as anybody who has a pet on this conference knows, it's not easy. Having a pet is a lot of work, and it tends to be a pretty big shock when you first get a pet, all the things that are more challenging than you expect. Some of those things are easier right now because you're at home, and some of them are harder right now because there are all these other challenges that are COVID related. So I think in that sense, we feel really just increasingly confident about what we're able to bring to this space and, what value add we can bring. But of course, to the question, sorry, I don't see the name of who asked it, but it in terms of that recession and economic downturn, that has been top of mind for me since day one, since the first day I locked myself in my apartment and haven't come out. And as Kevin knows, we are just really, really, really strict and conservative about keeping overhead low. It's hard when you're experiencing growth to rein it in and be conservative and not put all of your money into marketing and all of your money into capitalizing on that growth. And you see all these great signals and you just want to keep going. But I think it's really important to be mindful of the long haul and the fact that we probably are going to see a little bit of a spike in price sensitivity. This category is historically pretty resilient, and we definitely have seen a lot of that resilience in the last few months. But I think it's important to be conservative, in the way that you do that is just make sure that you're not spending money that you don't need to. That is another element of this world that we're in, is that you can do a lot more with a lot less. You know, we cut our leases, everybody's working from home, everybody's working as lean as possible, and so that's sort of how we're thinking about it. We've also right away started introducing more of a pricing mix. So from a product portfolio standpoint, making sure that we have some lower priced items mixed with higher priced items, just so as we see more price sensitivity, that we can have products for everybody. So
Awesome.
Does that answer it? Anything?
We're good. Yeah, we're a couple minutes over, so I'm going to pass it to Jill for the next panel. Just want to thank the three of you, and also point out to Myka and John, there's a couple of questions that we didn't have time to answer that were asked. So if you guys can maybe follow up on those from Jeremy and Scott, that would be great. And
Happy to.
Thank you to all of you, and great kickoff. And now Jill, take it from here.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks.
Great, thanks Kevin, thanks everyone. All right, so on this next panel, we're going to have Shayna from Dog Drop, Josh from Good Dog, and Garrett from WAG. If you all want to come on up virtually, as it were. So we'll talk a little bit about sort of COVID impacts in this panel, but then we'll also take it much farther and wider than that. But if you all want to go around and introduce yourselves first, maybe Shayna, you can kick us off, hand it over to Garrett, and then Josh, just a brief introduction of who you are and what you work on.
All right, sounds good, Jill. Hey everyone, I'm Shayna from Dog Drop. We're based in Los Angeles. So I'll give a quick background on myself. So before I started Dog Drop, I was actually living and working in China, primarily in the hardware industry. And then, of course, I moved back to Los Angeles, where I'm from, and I got a dog. So that's when I realized immediately that I needed support. It was kind of relevant, a lot of the conversation going on in the last panel. So I was someone who didn't have a traditional 9 to 5. I primarily worked from home most of the time, out to meetings, maybe a co-working space one or two times per week. And I just needed somewhere to drop off my dog for like 1 to 3 hours a day so that I could be productive at home working and that she could have all the needs that she needs. So basically, my co-founder and I, we started Dog Drop with the mission to provide accessible dog care with the quality services. Everything that I was finding was super outdated, and I know there's some talk on other dog daycares. The model was completely made for someone who worked from 9 to 6 and you wanted to drop off your dog all day. And so we decided to actually launch physical locations for what we call recreation and activity. So this is where most of our members had just dropped their dogs off for 1 to 3 hours a day. And then we're actually launching our own D2C line with at-home essentials to help further our mission to provide high quality and accessible products to dog parents.
Awesome. So, hey guys, I'm Garrett Smallwood at WAG. WAG invented on-demand dog walking 4 years ago, has been through quite the adventure since then. I think we have some pretty famous investors, some pretty famous employees. We're still alive and kicking. We offer on-demand dog walking, sitting, boarding, daycare drop-ins across the US. We're live in 50 states, 4,600 cities. We're by far the largest dog walking platform in the US. We also recently expanded to WAG Health, which is digital telehealth services, and we are working through WAG training. So we are kind of the #1 pet platform. We see tens of thousands of new customers a week, and that's WAG.
Hi guys, I'm Josh Weiss. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Good Dog. We help you get a dog responsibly. So we connect responsible breeders, shelters, and rescues with consumers who are looking to get a dog. I was just overhearing the last panel about the impact of COVID on getting a dog. Something happened in the last few months, maybe you guys can tell me what, but our numbers just went through the roof. So yeah, we definitely have seen a huge impact in people getting a dog, which is good news for everyone else on this panel. So exciting to be able to chat about it.
Yeah, great. So we won't spend too much time diving into COVID since the last panel unpacked that so well, but just Josh, in particular, because you sit at kind of the beginning of the life cycle of the pet ownership cycle. I would be very curious to hear a bit of what you've seen, because as Kevin pointed out earlier, you know, it is going to be a leading indicator, and all of those pets that have been adopted or purchased or what have you, they're not going anywhere, right? I am feeling this myself of like, oh man, this is actually a real sort of, you know, 10+ year commitment. And so given that you're in that leading indicator position, if you want to share just a little bit more, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, you know, the way to think about it is the percentage of households with dogs is going to increase. You know, prior to this, there were, let's just say, a theoretical, you know, percentage of households who would like to have had a dog, but didn't. And for various reasons, whether it's time, whether it's whatever it might be, the last 3 months has changed that dynamic, which has therefore unlocked the opportunity for that potential for those households who wanted a dog to now have a dog. You know, as we kind of go back to what we thought of as normal prior to coronavirus, you know, the factors that were preventing people may start to come back in, but there's a lot of kind of glue that came undone over the last 3 months that we don't really see being put back together. Or, you know, to give you a sense as to scale, it has not been, you know, 50%, it has not been 100%, it's been multiple hundreds of percentages in terms of increases. So it's a very significant increase. I live here in New York. I see it in my day-to-day. It's just everyone seems to now have a puppy around me, or is trying to train a puppy or something like that. So, you know, our point of view is that it'll go back down. And I think someone in the previous panel was mentioning this. We don't think it'll go back down. We're biased, obviously, but we don't think it'll go back down to the levels that it was at before. We think that there has been a change. And so, you know, shelters and rescues are being emptied out, which is just an unbelievably wonderful thing. Yeah, it's just the total number of dogs in the US. We've done some estimates ourselves. We think there's about 100 million dogs in the US. We think that number is going to be considerably higher over the next few years.
Awesome. Well, good news for Shana and Garrett then down the line. On that note, though, Shana and Garrett, I'm guessing that it has not been all tailwinds for you right now, just given that you're, you know, dealing with dog walking and a brick and mortar space. And so I'm curious if you could briefly touch on some of the challenges of dealing with curfews and quarantines. Garrett, maybe if you want to kick us off and then hand it over to Shana.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think, you know, as a reminder, we facilitate literally tens of thousands of services across the US every day. And when you're in lockdown, you probably don't need a dog walker. So we immediately saw kind of this flush out of, we call our T1 markets. So like LA, SF, New York, DC, kind of like almost immediately you could see, like even before COVID was announced, this like slowdown. And then we saw this rise in all of our, we call T2 through T4 markets. Think about like Waco, Texas, Flower Mound, Texas, like middle of nowhere. If anybody's from there, no offense, but these cities like did not matter to us before. And so it's been really amazing, actually. These kind of very remote areas have been very resilient and actually have grown pretty tremendously for us. And our T1 markets have just kind of remained very trepidatious, I think, for any additional services. But we've seen a really big rise in like long duration services. So like people before would book like a 20 or 30-minute walk while they're at work as a check-in, and you see a lot more long duration services. So you're at home, you're stuck inside, and you're like, I need the hour-long conference call to get done. So you book the hour-long walk. You see a lot more of that. So consumer behavior shifted pretty dramatically, although over the last probably 6 weeks, it started to cut back.
And I'll kind of jump in there. So obviously we have a physical location that we launched in January. So just about 8 weeks pre-COVID. We're very fortunate that we're under the dog daycare zoning, and that's deemed an essential business. So we've actually been able to stay open this whole time. And our kind of thesis has always been going also where people live, right? So our first location is on the ground floor of about 300 plus apartment units right above us. surrounded by 5 other multifamily complexes. So we have around 1,800 units within 0.05 miles from us. So just a few blocks, with all these people, I would say 95% of people working from home. So now more than ever, these people are seeing the reality of what it's like to be with your dog almost 24/7, which I think maybe none of us have ever seen before. And I'm sure, Jill, I know you just got a puppy and there's a huge uprise. What's been really cool is that we've seen people who have had a dog for, 5 years. They never needed another. They didn't use any other alternative service or solution. They never used dog walking before, no other dog daycares. And now they're saying like, hey, can I just get my dog out of the house for 2 hours a day and then they can return tired? And then we're also getting the new pet parent. So Josh is the start of that. And then what's really interesting for us is, of course, dogs have to have all their vaccinations. And to me, I'll be about, they're almost 12, 16 weeks before they can come into dog drop. So about then now the tail end of COVID, the last 8 weeks, we're seeing all those new puppies who haven't been able to socialize, because most of the time when you get a puppy, after they have the vaccinations, they can go to dog parks or out on walks, or you're mingling with your friends. And so now they're coming into dog drop and starting their routine with us.
So there's something interesting here that you're all kind of touching on in various ways, but it's just striking me that, everybody loves dogs. Normally when I think about startups that are in sort of consumer retail or consumer services, I often think of sort of them targeting urban millennials who, think of red antler branding and Subway ads as catnip for them. But in this case, Garrett, you mentioned sort of, Waco, Texas is an important market as well. And, Josh, I know that this is something that you've seen in your business as well. Shana, you're obviously sort of your flagship is in LA, but I'm curious how you all think about this. And so Josh, just again, given that you're kind of at the start of the life cycle here, I'm curious what your demographic is, what your consumer base looks like, and how the distribution of that plays out.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really fun part of the industry we're in and the business we're in. We've done some analysis on it, and our users, the people on the consumer side of our marketplace, are actually almost perfectly representative of the U.S. population as a whole. So even though we're sort of a tech startup, and as you mentioned, kind of in the no offense to red antler, but kind of in the red antler world, having a dog is something that is obviously extremely mass. Another thing I always mention to people is buying a dog from a breeder can be expensive, but so is buying a car, and so is buying a house, right? The absolute numbers are high. That's how much dogs cost. And, people with lower incomes or who are retirees or wherever it might be that, in other tech verticals in early stage just don't think about as being your customers. For us, we have an extremely wide range of users. Retirees, empty nesters have always been really big drivers of demand for us. One of my favorite stories is someone would tell us that after they left for college, their parents got a dog and named it the same name as the child who went to college.
No.
Which was weird, but anyway. So we see really a very wide range of consumers. And I think one thing that we think about a lot, our brand and what we do is very centered around quality. We think that's one of the biggest factors that consumers are looking for in this space. And how do you make quality as a brand, as a value proposition, accessible to everybody? That's something that drives us a lot, and we've seen a lot of success with.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. Garrett and Shana, anything to add to that?
I would just say for us, one really interesting thing, and since I think everyone here has a lot of data and statistics about their demographics, is that we see a huge kind of majority of our customers are actually males. So it's interesting to see a lot of dog brands very much kind of market towards females and what that means, especially within pet services. So these are all things some of, your typical audience, and then even the older generation as well, being so many startups are focused on millennial dog parents, but that we have a lot of retirees that have dogs as well, that they're maybe not able to give the dog the exercise and activity that they need. And they can provide the dog an awesome life at their house or apartment, right? But they can't take them if they have an Australian Shepherd or something for a long run or hike. And so that we get a lot of members that way as well.
Just as a quick aside, that's great, Shanna. Thank you for that. As a quick aside, I just want to encourage everyone who's watching to participate in the Q&A, and I'll get to some of those questions here in a few minutes. So by all means, drop your questions in there. I wanted to talk about something, again, this goes to kind of the universality of pets, but something that seems to have changed over time is just the degree of investment in pets. Shayna, to what you were just talking about, sort of people's different conceptions of sort of their own pet's wellness or almost like pet mental health. And so I would be curious to hear you, and then also maybe Garrett, touch a little bit upon how you've seen that shift, how you're detecting it continuing to shift over time, just in terms of, again, the amount of investment that people are putting in, not just to pet care, but to actual pet wellness here.
Yeah, I actually see this trend very similar to what we see in human health and human health trends, right? So I think I know Garrett touched on like T1 cities, like tier 1 cities. We look at Los Angeles, New York, and they start out with all these great human health trends, whether that's yoga or kale, whatever the hottest things are, right? And then now, of course, the last 5 years or so, we've seen awesome pet brands, and especially in the diet. So the fresh dog food, and they're getting all these great things for how important it is for real food, right? And then now maybe the tail end is a few years behind, but that the dog health industry can focus on kind of follow what we see in human health trends, right? So now pets, we have the nutrition, we have the supplements, and now we want to see how we can have complete dog wellness. So that comes with preventative care, whether that's, getting your dog to exercise the recommended 2 to 3 hours per day, whether that's socialization, and then how critical dog's behavior is. I'm sure, Josh and some of the other people who are working with dog breeders and rescues and training know how important dog behavior it is to keep that dog in the home so that they're not returned back to the shelters. So there's kind of a lot of different elements that we look at. And I think investors are starting to see the dog wellness trend and move now. We've hit the food, the supplements, and see what's next.
Yeah, I think some of that's right. I think one of the things we really think about a lot is pet parent guilt. Like, people feel really guilty leaving their dog behind while they're at work for 10 hours a day. They feel really bad when their dog eats poor quality food. They feel really bad when their dog feels sick. They feel bad when their dog can't go to the bathroom. Like, there's just all this guilt that you drive when you have a dog, right? Like, I think everyone can relate to that. And so you're looking for solutions to remove that guilt that are really seamless. I think historically it has not been seamless to remove guilt as a pet parent, right? Like, the only person that can remove guilt for you was Petco or PetSmart. And it was like, I call it the great unbundling of the store, but it used to do pet adoption, daycare, boarding, grooming, food, treats, like everything was in this box. And like, no one wants to go to that box anymore, but they still have to. And so what you're seeing is this great unbundling, and these brands starting to come out, and people now have like a really seamless choice on how to remove the guilt associated with these core competencies. And so I think pet parents generally are going to start moving more toward realizing that guilt while they're at home, and then like work to adjust to it. So like, the reason Good Pup's doing so well is because people see their dog all day now. Like, they didn't see this before. And so I think the same thing's true with, when we're post-COVID world, people are going to realize their dog needs 2 hours of exercise a day, and they're going to go to dog drop. So I think guilt is like this number one driver, and you need to figure out where the guilt exists.
Guilt is a powerful driver indeed. No one can say no to puppy eyes, right? So along that line, Garrett, I'm curious to hear all three of your thoughts on kind of what's next. If you were to be starting a new company today, or, as you look out and, have dived into the space yourself, I'm sure you've detected sort of where there's still white space or opportunity, et cetera, for new entrants to come in. And I would love to hear your opinions on that. You know, there's obviously been a lot of talk about sort of retail and the intersection with pet services. And so, yeah, Garrett, maybe if you want to kick off that conversation.
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunity right now is going to be in like, and this is in no disrespect to veterinarian clinics, but like vets. Vets are like kind of these sorely disappreciated professionals. Like, as a reminder to everyone here, vets are literally doctors. And I think a lot of people forget that. Like, but they're doctors. Like, they went to medical school for pets, and like they truly love what they do. And I think they've been kind of underappreciated or forgotten about. Like, everyone's kind of like trying to disintermediate the vet, or, you know, use the vet as a utility for an affiliate, like pet insurance. But I actually think like the vet clinic is like a really powerful place. Like, a lot of things happen there. And when you talk to our pet parents, the number one person they trust is the vet. Like, you pull them and they're like, who do you trust above all else? Like, the vet. I do whatever the vet says, I do. And I think that's a really powerful relationship. It's still a doctor. And so I think that there's, and I don't think, I'm not like harping on telehealth. I just think that there's going to be like a one medical, and there already are these one medical for the vet office. There's going to be these like really beautiful software for vets. But I really think a lot of it's going to come down to like the SMBs themselves. There's too much bundling happening and consolidation. Someone's going to come out and like start rebuilding vet clinics, and it's going to be really successful.
This is going to be great because we have a vet panel coming up this afternoon.
Nailed it. You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you later.
They'll pick up what you're putting down, I'm sure. Josh, what do you think?
Well, first of all, to everyone coming up in the next panel, I totally agree. I see some folks that I recognize, and I think that, you know, to me, is kind of a little bit of a cop-out answer in the sense that I don't necessarily have what the idea is. I don't think about much besides what I'm doing today. But it's amazing to me, I think, kind of the delta between the investment dollars going into the pet space and the size of the opportunity, which is really, really exciting. I think it's, for various reasons, a bit of an underappreciated, underfunded space. I think that's been changing over the last few years, but especially prior to the last few years, I think that was the case. Which means that there's just an incredible amount of opportunity in every vertical within the space. And I think you see that in this conference. You know, so for me, it's really all about pointing to every other sort of little box on the screen that I see in front of me in terms of what everyone else is doing that I think is really exciting. I think we're in a very, very early stage of that. I think one of the things that we look at is when you see the dollars being spent, to Garrett's point about Petco and PetSmart, you know, they've had a lock-in for a long time, and they've been able to keep that, and they've been keeping up in many ways. But, you know, obviously as these VC dollars, and even without VC dollars, as entrepreneurs step in and deliver really phenomenal experiences, both in terms of better experiences, but also in terms of innovations, there's going to be a lot more competition in the space, which is a good thing for the consumer. So I think there's going to be a lot of really new ways to deliver service. I think there's going to be lower costs to deliver the same quality, you know, high quality service. And there's going to be new things that people come up with, because what we see overall is behavior is changing. We're all talking about it as very assumed, because in this panel, obviously, we're all in the space, but the idea of how consumers think about their dog, you know, has now become almost cliche, right? That they're like family, but the ramifications of that are actually huge. And I think the needs that derive from that are actually just starting to be met. So that, you know, I see a lot of opportunity doing that.
So we're going to go quickly to questions here. We're going to go for another 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll cut to a very brief break. So Shayna, there's a question in the chat here from a dog daycare owner, and you know, she's touching upon the kind of debate as to whether there will be a surge in people working from home, who need to focus, who want to drop their dogs off with you, or you know, the surge in people working from home. Well, I might as well just keep my puppy at home with me. What's your very quick take on that?
Sure. So I think overall there's a completely new trend of retail, right? That if you're offering a traditional service in the traditional way, the old way of doing things, I don't know if that's going to be sustainable for this new work from home kind of norm, right? So I think whether that's creating more flexible memberships, if it's providing a positive member experience, whatever that is, if someone's coming into a physical location, it's because they cannot get that experience or service or product online, or else they're going to go to Chewy, or else they're going to go to some of these other services. So I think it's to look at it, what's going on within retail, and to see if you can meet your users' needs that way.
Awesome. Garrett, really quickly, how do you deal with quality control with trainers and walkers?
That's our secret sauce. I think as a reminder, we have about 250,000 active pet caregivers on the platform. Our average rating is 99.4% of reviews are 5-star. So the platform is generally very, very healthy. And that's a combination of just the marketplace functioning now. It's now been 4 years, and it's kind of this beautiful flywheel of self kind of validation. But that's kind of the secret. The secret is how we kind of maintain platform happiness, and that's what makes WAG WAG.
Awesome. And then quickly, one for you, Josh. Jonathan Ambrose is asking, generally there's a negative sentiment towards dog breeders. I definitely found this when I was looking for a dog breeder. I actually used Good Dog, just to give you the plug there. What have you seen change in terms of the sentiment around dog breeders, and how do you approach that?
I think there's been a little bit more awareness over the fact that, most people get their dog from a dog breeder. But what you would think, hearing people who do talk about where they got their dog, is that most people got their dog from a rescue or a shelter. For us, we have both on the platform. What we care about is that you get your dog in a responsible way, which you can do so in any direction you want to go. And what we're finding is that sentiment is kind of resonating with people, that people are saying, hey, regardless of which way I want to go, I want to get the dog that's right for me in the right way. And so as everyone's been needing now to find a way to get a dog, a lot of people have been texting me or emailing me saying, hey, help. What we found is that people care about where their dog is coming from. They want their dog to be healthy. They want to do good for the broader ecosystem. And so regardless of where they're coming from, even if they're coming from a breeder, they care more about that the dog is coming from a place that's doing things responsibly than which particular source. There are shelters and rescues who have practices that maybe people don't want to support either. So it's definitely something that we've seen changing.
Great. So we're going to wrap it up here. We've already run a little bit over, but thank you so much, Shayna, Garrett, Josh, for joining us. There are still some questions in the chat if the three of you want to look at the Q&A that you have at the bottom of the screen. Some of these are about telehealth and also sort of smart technologies. And I just want to preview, we're going to be talking more about those later this afternoon over the next hour. So with that, we'll kick to a brief 5-minute break if everyone wants to go refill their coffee or whatever they need to do. And we'll see you back here around 1:05, 1:07, something like that. Thanks so much.
Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed a quick break there. Want to now invite up for our third panel, Shannon Falconer from Because Animals, and an awesome supporting cast to talk about the future of pet nutrition. Shannon, Reynaldo, I think I see all of you here. Do you want to just come on up? Awesome, thanks.
Hey everyone. So, yep, I'm Shannon, and I just want to start by saying it's a real treat for me to be here and to be moderating this panel. I'm relative to the other folks you'll hear. I'm a relative newbie to the pet food industry. So I'm trained as a biochemist, and I left my academic career 4 years ago to co-found Because Animals, which is a startup making cultured meat pet food. And for those of you who are not familiar with cultured meat, basically that is meat grown from the cell state versus an animal. So the product is a more humane and environmentally sustainable meat that is produced, that we culture rather than meat that is traditionally produced from an animal. So it's been pretty cool for me to see that despite the pet food industry historically being known for its lack of innovation, in just these short 4 years, I've personally really seen a shift in consumers and the way that what they want for their pets, what they want to feed their pets, what they're willing to do to keep their pets healthy. And I think that it's really this shift that's and what these consumers want and what pet parents want that's really going to drive the industry, pet food industry, out of this sort of known stagnancy. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So with that, I'd like to just take a moment to have each of the panelists introduce themselves, and let's start with Jason.
Awesome, let's do it. Hey everyone, I'm Jason Fiedler. I'm a partner at Left Lane Capital. We invest in high growth, high repeat consumer businesses based in New York, typically writing $5 to $25 million lead checks. In terms of pet, I was one of the first investors in the Farmer's Dog, in another pet food business called Sunday, and then in a pet services startup called Spa. And good to see you, Alex and Reynaldo. It's been a while.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, so Reynaldo, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hello, I'm Reynaldo. I'm the founder of PetPlate. Before starting PetPlate, I was at McKinsey & Company. I was a consultant there and then transitioned over to L. Catterton. I spent a lot of time helping a variety of companies, private and public, but I, over time, just kind of spent a lot of time in the pet food space, and that led me to starting PetPlate. And PetPlate, we're a direct-to-consumer, digitally native brand, all human-grade food made in USDA facility. We just launched our first line of 100% USDA organic treats as well. So, digitally native subscription business.
Thank you for that. And Alex, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Alex Tuzet. I'm the founder and also a board member and former CEO of Ollie, which is in the same category as the Farmer's Dogs, Nom Nom Nom, and PetPlate. Did that 5 years ago. And then most recently, I just launched my new company called Pumpkin. Pumpkin is a direct-to-consumer pet health insurance, and our model is a bit unique where we're the only pet insurance that also offer comprehensive services with a direct shipment of parasiticides, so tick-free and heartworm medicine directly to consumer.
Cool, great, thank you. So I'd like to start off with a pretty broad question, and that is just what are the biggest trends in pet food? Do you see that shifting at all over the next few years, and if so, how? And I'm going to throw this one to Reynaldo to begin with.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I think some of the general trends you're seeing is obviously like healthy online subscription. It's almost becoming like table stakes, and I think some of the new trends are really leading towards how you can really like rise above and differentiate. At PetPlate, also I think Now and Farmer's Dog, there's been a little bit of a focus on personalization. So finding out information about the pet, whether it's their breed, any health issues they have, and then kind of offering more kind of customized meals and dishes for that. I think there's also going to be a push towards functional, so think functional foods, functional treats, etc. As we see, there's a slightly aging pet population. There are more health issues that pet owners are trying to address. And I think the final thing I would say is, really bringing that all under one roof. My experience, during COVID is, obviously getting, PetPlate delivered to my home. We're just getting now some treats, but there are all kinds of other, goods and, particularly on the nutrition side that you need for your dog that we want to make sure we have all underneath one, one roof and come to you in one box, just to really kind of remove the thought and allow you to spend more time with your dog as opposed to buying things for your dog.
Great, awesome. Jason, do you have thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think I don't think it's going to be anything crazy new that we haven't seen before. I think it's going to be a huge acceleration of a lot of the same trends. So healthy, as Reynaldo mentioned, online, subscription, these are all things that emerged, 3-5 years ago that I think are just going to continue ever more in the kind of COVID environment. I think that sparked, what we're going to see is just increased percentages shifting all online. I think Brian Jaffe at Cascadia, I don't know if he's on here. They're one of the leading kind of like pet merchant banks, and he said something that I thought was interesting, which is we were in the era of pet premiumization and humanization, but you can't further humanize something that's already been humanized. You can't make more I guess you can make more premium, but he said now we've reached this era of health and wellness, and I think we've humanized our pets. It's now about what can we do to enhance their lives. It's viewing food as medicine. It's viewing daycares as kind of places for fun, not places where you can go ditch your dog for a certain amount of time. So I think it's going to be a lot more of the same, with an emphasis on function. And then also I think sustainability is going to become a bigger thing as direct to consumer. There's just a lot of packaging, and then in terms of just the meat supply chain, I think there's going to be more and more pressure there.
Yeah, great. And you touched on something that's really important and topical and interesting that I definitely want to come back to. But before we do, I just want to check in with Alex. Do you have anything to add, Alex, in terms of next big trends?
Yeah, I think it's not too different than what some prior panelists say. But one thing that's very interesting is you look at the food industry in the US is about 30 billion. Still growing like a couple points every year, but most of the segment is still this sort of fairly antiquated product, which is a dry food that is not necessarily like nutritionally, it's nutritionally maybe sound, but doesn't really mirror the ancestral diets that dogs used to eat. And it's undeniable that it leads to tremendous health issue. And I think that the challenge up there is, and now I'm on the insurance side, and I know the data and the facts. So like, people underestimate what it costs to care for a pet. I think the really first things, and we heard this from the prior panel, is like when you decide to adopt a pet, like it's really a big responsibility. You have to care for them, you have to give them 1 month exercise, you have to feed them well, and you have to be ready to pay for the care. Just over a lifetime, just in veterinary care, you're going to spend like for a dog $20,000, and that if things go well. Just last year, to give you a sense, the highest claim in the US for treatment was $100,000 for a dog. And most of those issues tend to be related to nutrition. So feeding your pet the right way, like investing on the front end, and maybe primatizing, as opposed to spend $30 a month feeding your dog, if you spend like $100 a month feeding your dog, over the lifetime of like 12, 13, 14 years, it's actually going to save you a fair amount of money. And I think that's a part that is still a huge chunk of the market doesn't really understand that. My concern with innovation is that dogs and cats are very daring. They'll try anything. They'll even eat some chocolates, and that's bad for them. And if you have to like take your dogs to a vet to be treatment because they ate some chocolate, it'll cost you $3,000 just to fix that. So what I'm concerned about innovation is that innovation can be in the place that yes, dogs and cats will eat it, but doesn't necessarily mean that it equates to make your dogs or your cats healthier.
Okay, thanks for that. So, yeah, I mean, let's circle back to this, to what Jason had spoken about. I think probably to what you're touching upon, Alex, and that is that meat is really a central ingredient in pet food. And now, in the era of COVID, where we see meat shortages, what do you see? How do you see pet food being affected by these meat shortages due to COVID? And in fact, I mean, we can also sort of broaden that even further and say, just prior to COVID, people were the idea of the meat consumption and animal-based products were already very much on people's radar due to environmental sustainability reasons. So, do you see pet food being affected by this at all, given the important role that meat currently plays in our pets' diets and in the industry as a whole? And let me. So, Alex, why don't you start with this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I don't think there's a simple or easy answer to it. I think obviously the answer is yes, it will be impacted. Just the supply and demand equation. So yes, will there be price pressure? There's going to be margin pressure in the short run on the industry as a byproduct. That being said, you know, having been in the industry and just bought the product, there's very different tier and grades of meat. So meat is not just meat, is what kind of quality, what premium. So if you're like Farmer's Dog, Pet Plate, Ollie, you're buying, you know, human grade quality meat, that's just a bit different than the product that you're going to be buying if you're using as an ingredient to make a product like Blue Buffalo, right? Those don't really necessarily belong to the same category, and they may not experience the same kind of price pressure as a result of the impact of food shortages.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, I mean, typically a lot of meat, the big commercial brands are made with, yeah, often a very low quality meat, or 4D meat as it would be referred to, right? Dead, dying and diseased animals. But I mean, I think what I would say is, you know, when we're thinking about the meat supply chain, meat is meat. So, so whether or not human grade is better for our pets, that's great. But in terms of, again, that environmental sustainability piece, and just what's out there to feed people, are we going to be able to continue to feed our pets this ingredient? Reynaldo, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, I agree very much with Alex. You know, you have to look at it across like the different tiers, and I think the FDA has actually allowed companies now like Blue Buffalo, et cetera, instead of, you know, using kind of, you know, some of the subpar, you know, ingredients, you know, the meat meals or like the acidified slurries, I think is what they call them. They're now actually able to use like more premium meat. So here at Pet Plate, we're wondering like, oh, is that going to impact like our, you know, premium meat supply? But luckily that has not happened. You know, I think that the general trend is just going to be that companies, you know, like Pet Plate, Ollie, Farmer's Dog, et cetera, you know, are just going to have to do a better job on the procurement angle to make sure that they are able to alleviate kind of, you know, the margin pressures and can continue to go out and find additional sources. And, you know, I'll also say that, you know, some of the limitations that are put on companies will result in kind of the exotic meats, right? You know, I think you'll see bison, venison, et cetera, potentially being launched across companies in the near future. But, you know, COVID's probably going to slow some of that innovation just due to, hiccups in those supply chains.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess one thing that COVID has shown us as well is that, you know, especially intense animal farming can lead to the spread of zoonotic diseases and hence pandemics. So, so whether or not, you know, so from that perspective, certainly meat that's from, you know, free range animals that are spread apart and they have room to graze and to move about. From that perspective, they perhaps those are breeding grounds less likely for something to spread of some kind of virus. In terms of a sustainability question, unfortunately, it's those intensive animal agriculture factories that in a way are more sustainable because you have more animals concentrated into one space. The downside, of course, is that the cruelty, if there's ethical issues around that, and antibiotic use, many other problems associated with climate change, et cetera. So I guess, yeah, we continue to circle back to, regardless of where that meat comes from, whether it's a free range animal and it's human grade or it's a factory farmed piece of meat, can the world do it? So Jason, do you want to weigh in here?
Sure. I think just a couple points that came to mind. I think you know, I think it's worth noting that a lot of the food that we've been talking about is human grade, right? So it's produced in human grade facilities. It's not part of the traditional pet supply chain. So there's extra pressure, I think, because the just total supply of human grade supply chain that's willing to cook pet food is smaller. And then the other thing is, it's not just about the meat right now, just specifically right now. I mean, labor is pressured really hard. So if you're already squeezed at your factory and now, you know, COVID's wiped out, you know, 80% or so, there's just pressure on the supply side. I think that sustainable options are interesting. I think, you know, you've seen the cricket proteins and whatnot. Until that becomes economically, you know, at least economic parity, right? I think there's the consumers at the true mass market or even the mass premium market are not willing to spend that much more for something sustainable. Maybe I'm wrong, I haven't run a survey on that, but I think you need to be in the ballpark. And when you have cricket protein at higher than beef prices, it's just really tough to make the argument because people are already spending a lot in the first place for the premium meats. So I think that it's something that that would be really, that is interesting, makes a lot of sense. I just think someone needs to figure out a way to make it economically viable, and then it'll actually enter the discussion. Until then, I think it's just, I think it's going to stick with meat, traditional meat.
Okay.
And just to build on that, I think that there's definitely like, at least what we see kind of coming from our customers, right? We haven't necessarily seen too much of a spike in terms of asking about, kind of like meat alternatives like in our dishes, but there's definitely been a push for, to your point, Shannon, getting, free range, organic, et cetera. We tried to address that, through launching our treats, but, I'm still seeing a huge demand from our customers for meat, and they want their dishes to be like meat forward. You're not seeing as much on kind of the vegan and vegetarian. I don't know, Alex, if you would agree, if you saw similar things, while you were at Ollie.
Yeah, no, I think we see similar trends. I mean, we're in the same space. We kind of market to very similar customers, and people tend to ask the exactly same question. So it's also like just where the reality, kind of hits the road, where like people, they have the aspiration and the values to be going all the way, but then the price point is also a price inhibitor. I think over time it expands the market, but you have to walk before you run. I mean, look, I'm pleasantly pleased when I see as an industry where when you aggregate the amount of revenue that companies like Ollie, Farmer's Dog, Just Food for Dog, Nom Nom Nom, Pet Play created, compared to where it was 5 years, and the degree of skepticism that was met initially when we were pitching investors, well, because the category was like this big, and we were creating an industry, and now aggregated, it's probably close to 400 to 500 million. So it's pretty amazing that in 5 years with a CAGR that's probably like 50-60% year over year. It's amazing how much a consumer, because that was a big thing people were having a hard time to accept, is when we were pitching, like they were looking company like Blue Buffalo, industry leader, $2 billion in gross revenue at the retail space, and just charging about like $2.50 to $3 a pound, and we were coming with an offering that was like 2x that, and like, how do you get demand? Like, how do you don't become just a teeny niche player? 5 years later, we've all validated that it's highly scalable and it's growing fast and it's really good unit economic. But it was a hot pitch.
Yeah, interesting. And yeah, I agree with you guys. I mean, meat is always, it's what people want to feed their pets. And so no matter the sustainability issues or animal welfare, vegan or vegetarian diets will always be a niche if they're going to exist at all. Yeah, meat is definitely at the forefront. Of course, the business that I'm in, my personal take on this is that we need to come up with a much more sustainable way to feed our pets versus animal-based meat. And so, but definitely, in terms of we need to be able to meet that certainly meet the price point of the ultra premium market. So, and it's going to take a while for cultured meat to get there. But I personally don't underestimate the drive that people have to purchase sustainable options. I mean, if we look at Beyond Meat's IPO being one of the most successful, yeah, there's evidence for it everywhere. And as we look at humanization and trends, people want to do for their pets what they're doing for themselves, which is become a more conscious consumer. So yeah, I mean, I agree with many parts of what all of you guys are saying, perhaps with a slight difference. Anything else any of you'd like to add before we move on to another question? No? Okay. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the difference in the market between cat and dog. So people often speak broadly about the pet category just to include both cat and dog. But do you see any innovations or areas of interest that are specific or unique to either cat or dog? Jason, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I have a lot of thoughts. I feel like I could talk about this for a while, because if you think about the last 4 or 5 years, I mean, Alex, Reynaldo, were both had pitches with both of you guys. That was 4 or 5 years ago when dog was initially taking off, and the trends of premiumization, humanization, that was really starting to materialize into human grade food. I think we're just starting to see that in cat. And so it's interesting that while there were 4 or 5 players right out of the gate on the dog side of things, on the cat side, there's a company called Smalls. There's not many other, truly fresh options. There's Nom Nom that's kind of covered both pet and both pets, but a lot of the other players have remained kind of loyal to dogs. And I think there is a room for a dedicated cat brand, but I think it emphasizes that 1, cats eat a lot less, 2, cats are pickier, and 3, cats need more SKUs and just more product diversity in order to satisfy their palates. So I think it's a trickier, it's a trickier pet, but at the same time, I think they are similarly, and also the cat owner is a bit more introverted, right? Versus the dog owner, which is extroverted, and I think that's why those trends were able to materialize sooner. But they're still in the home. The better the food you feed, the worse the litter smells, the better the coat is. There's similar advantages. So I think cat's definitely a different animal in terms of unit economics, but there are more cats than dogs in the U.S. I think there's 100 million cats. It's about the same, but I think we're observing similar trends. I just think it's definitely lagging. I don't know what anyone else thinks.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reynaldo, let us know your thoughts, please.
Yeah. No, sorry. I think I might have been a little laggy there for a second, but I definitely agree with what Jason was saying there in terms of cat being a little bit more kind of complicated to tackle than dog in terms of the different SKUs and kind of the needs from the pet. But I do think that on the dog side, there's a lot of opportunity for just being very innovative on the human grade side when it comes to treats, supplements, occupational cues. I think there are a lot of natural bolt-ons that companies like PetPlate are looking at in order to kind of drive AOV and additional purchase volume from their customers. I think cat has a lot of that actually already baked in, whether it's from like the litter, et cetera. And I just wonder how much, all of that scales, across like the different species. So I think a lot of that's going to be interesting. And, but in terms of a trend for both species, I personally, and maybe it's the nerd in me, gets excited about diagnostic tests, kind of helping like inform food and answer a lot of questions. We see many of the early adopters that have come to PetPlate, or some of our highest LTV customers, or customers that get into the science and care about specific health issues their dogs have, and I assume it's very much similar for cats. So being able to help answer those questions and deliver how nutrition can help improve whatever health issues their companion animals may have, I think is going to be a really interesting trend that should span both species.
Yeah, I agree with what Reynaldo is saying. It's interesting, and it kind of goes back to some of the prior question on innovation, is what's not really being cracked yet in the space is true personalization on the food side. You have Royal Canin, which is probably the largest brand in the world today, doing 3.5 billion in revenue, and they do have formulation by breed and some species, but it goes down to like the top maybe 10, 15. Doesn't really go beyond that. And I think that Reynaldo brings a really good point, because we look at this in the veterinary space with Pumpkin, and we have a partnership with Zoetis, so we do a lot of work in diagnostics, and we've I've talked to the CEO of Embark. They do like DNA testing on pets, and we have access to a genomic product here at Pumpkin, and I think that's the part that becomes interesting, is like when you understand really truly the genetic. Not just like, oh, you're guessing you're a mixed breed, like kind of what we do on our surveys today on the intake form at Ollie and some other player, but like truly actually have a data from a DNA test like Embark, and then mixing that to a genomic database so that you can actually look at the prediction of what kind of disease or allergies your pet, dog, and cat can have, and then start to custom tailor a formulation that mirror what it is and actually start to really work around. Now, the tricky part is you can do this and do very well, but if it's not palatable, you may say, this is perfect for your pet, but the pet tries to eat it, doesn't like it. You're just not going to feed it to them, right? And that's always like one of the big challenges with food is you always come down to, does my dog likes it or not? Because if they don't like it, it doesn't matter. Same for cats. So cats also a little more tricky, as Jason say. They're more finicky animal. They have more issue on palatability. As a result, they need more SKUs. They need more hydration. They don't hydrate as well as dogs. So the food needs to be a higher degree of moisture. So dry food doesn't really quite work for them. Actually, for a cat, you should be really going more to a wet or fresh food, like some of the offer in the marketplace. And it's actually interesting. Like there's misunderstood data on like how many cats out there. Like even the AVMA doesn't know how many cats are actually in the US, because there's a ton of cats around the US who are just on farms and they never see a vet. Like the medicalization rate of dogs is around 78%. So 70% of dogs in the US actually go and are overseen by vets. With cats, is less than 60%. And so the kind of people we're marketing to with our product at Ollie or Pet Plates tend to correlate very heavily with people who will go to the vet and the animals are medicalized, because that overlap with pet parenting. So same with cats, it's a lower amount of people. But one thing that we see, for example, with Pumpkin is because we do have insurance for both dogs and cats. We do have actually a fair amount of multi-family, multi-pets, where it's not just a dog family or a cat family. They are they are feline and dogs in the household. So with product like what Pet Plate is doing, what Ollie is doing, there's opportunities also now cross-sell new product lines for that, because most likely is 20 to 30% of your customers also have a cat in home. And so you could be selling a product for them, which actually make it easier from a unit economic and is the business sustainable, because you've already built a huge infrastructure to service dogs and you can leverage that assets for cats as well.
We have one too many customers actually saying that they feed, sorry, Jason. I was just going to tell them, say we have one too many customers saying they feed Pet Plate to their cats. And we're like, oh, we didn't formulate it for that. Please don't do that.
Yeah.
I was just
not enough taurine.
I was just going to add one point around. So I think, the vast majority of innovation or startups that I've seen over the last 4 or 5 years are targeted on dogs specifically. They say pets, but it's dogs. I would say 95%. Then there's 5% in cat. Cat's starting to get, more popular from an entrepreneur perspective. I think, the writing there is on the wall, and I think people are starting to see that trend materialize a bit more. So I wouldn't be surprised to see cat start to get some real attention over the next 6 to 12 months. But the other thing that we're focused on, or I think is even further than that, reptile, fish, horse. There are 9 million horses. People spend $3,000 a year on a horse. This bird seed with bird tourism is a $5 billion market in the US. So there are other categories that are completely wide open, where I think that if you can be really early and acquire a lot of market share, there could be some really interesting businesses made. And it's the same dynamic where the incumbents in this category are absolutely inept and looking to buy all their innovations. So I think we're going to see some interesting businesses beyond the traditional 2 companion animals as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're right on equine. There's a company in the US called Platinum that does nutrition supplements for horses, and I know that their revenue is north of like 50 million per year, and that they're just a leader just doing nutrition supplements for horses, because for them it's really important to be extremely precise.
Thanks, everyone. And I see Adam is back here because we could keep talking, I think, for another hour or two, but Adam is here to tell us that it's time to wrap up. So thank you very much, guys, for all of your awesome insights. And thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hate to be the bad guy to have to wrap up such a great conversation, but excited to invite up here our final panel on the future of veterinary care, run by Ryan Boyko, who's the CEO of Embark, one of our portfolio companies. Ryan, do you want to take it away?
Thanks, Adam. So I'm the founder and CEO of Embark. We do dog genetic testing. I think we came up in the last panel. We've been seeing the same kinds of trends in the last few months that you all have in the last few years, but we've got a great panel with Ben Jacobs from Mars Pet Care, a former founder and CEO of Whistle. Celine Haluya, who is the founder and CEO of Celevity, doing some really great work developing treatments to improve dog lifespan. And she was previously the chief of staff at the Longevity Fund. Zubin Bate, the co-founder and CEO of Fuzzy Pet Health, focused on making exceptional veterinary care more accessible and engaging. And Aaron Hirschhorn, the founder of Gallant, doing stem cell therapy for pets. Before Gallant, Aaron was the founder of Dog Vacay, which was acquired by Rover, and he's also a active investor in the space. So a great panel, and I was going to start by letting them give a little bit more of a background of themselves than what I could do. So Ben, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. Hey, everybody. Really enjoyed the discussions today, so thanks to all the previous panelists. I'm a crazy dog person, so I'm guilty of not supporting Left Lane's cat thesis. I have 2 dogs, Duke and Rex. Started Whistle about 10 years ago now and ran that business for 6 years. And I've since been involved in a few different pet care initiatives, as Ryan referenced, but overall just, big fan of the space and big dog person. Will be an early adopter of any dog-focused products.
Celine? Has she been able to join yet? I can't see.
I'm right here. Can you hear me?
There you are.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I think I'm signed in as you, but I am Celine, not Ryan. Yeah, my background is actually on the human biopharma and aging biology side. So I did neuroscience academically, started a PhD at Oxford in economics of gene therapy, and then left that to go be Laura Deming's chief of staff and work on developing drugs to extend human lifespan, which is where I learned about dog genetics and the really interesting gene genetics behind dog lifespan. So spun out Celebrity about 6 months ago to work on that.
Great. Zubin?
Hey, Zubin, co-founder and CEO at Fuzzy Pet Health. I've been in this business for 4.5 years now. Our focus is really to reduce friction around pet health to focus on longevity of pet life. So really excited about a lot of what I've heard from some of the other panelists, and really excited about this panel specifically around increasing access to care through digital means too.
Aaron, take it away. You're on mute.
Rocket science. Okay, I'm Aaron Hirschhorn. I'm the founder of a company called Dog Vacay. We were early on in the sharing economy, dog sitting, dog walking, merged with Rover back in 2017. And then recently I started a new company called Gallant. We do stem cell therapy, regenerative medicine for pets. And I got into that because of an experience I had that a stem cell therapy cured an injury of my own back. And I'm also a very, very small investor in a few of the companies that are up here, and super excited just to see everybody together. So thanks to SLO for throwing this all together.
Yeah, great. So let's dive into a few questions. There's a lot of horsepower here. So Ben, could you tell us a little bit about what you see the future of end of life and palliative care for pets?
Yeah, this is an area I'm super passionate about, and sort of related to the Left Lane comment about seemingly niche markets, but that can be very deep niches. End-of-life care, I think, is a real unmet need for pet owners. I've got 2 senior dogs. We just found out yesterday, actually at a veterinary visit, that Rex, who we already knew was deaf, seems to be also going blind. So we have got a fun blind and deaf 11-year-old dog. And I think as you get to the real end-of-life care, so where you're no longer going to treat the underlying disease, but are getting into palliative care and eventually euthanasia, there are both healthcare needs and I would say emotional needs for the family in that moment. One of the companies, we were really proud to support via LEAP is called Pet Hospice, focused on this problem of how do you provide both digital and in-person tools for folks and families all the way up through in-home euthanasia and even grief counseling after the fact. And so I just think you're going to see people in veterinary care. Yes, there's problems across the entire stack that we can talk about in physical hospitals and digital. And, there's a lot of imperfections around all the private equity activity going on. But I think that entrepreneurs tackling one very specific problem like end-of-life care can make a very deep and meaningful impact when they do.
Great, yeah. I wanted to move to maybe a more hopeful, in a sense, question. But Celine, I think you're trying to put the palliative care businesses out of business. So what is it going to take to to double the lifespan of dogs? What are the innovations that get us there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll like give a little bit of context about dogs. They're kind of the world's most interesting genetic experiment, unintentionally. I mean, we domesticated them about 15,000 years ago. They're kind of the wolf hybrid dogs, and it was only recently that actually we selectively bred dogs become poodles, Great Danes, German Shepherds, and you don't often see this kind of genetic diversity within one species. Usually, when we have often tried to breed an animal to become a way in which we wanted more, so like chickens, cows, for example, to have more milk. It was all kind of towards one point, but in dogs we went towards 100 different points. So we have kind of all these animals of the same species that all differ genetically quite a bit, but within the breeds are actually very inbred. And the reason I'm giving this context is because I think that there's a lot of things we can learn from what accidental genetic mistakes we give to dogs that we can compensate for with drugs to hopefully make them live longer lives and kind of prevent some of the diseases that we accidentally kind of encumbered on them. So most dogs have a specific type of cancer that they're predisposed to get. A lot of big dogs have hip dysplasia, which is a genetic disease. Smaller dogs often can't breathe, things like that. So I actually think the secret's kind of already there. There actually are already drugs that can hit these pathways. The kind of question is understanding what are the genetic drivers or the biological drivers of disease, and then finding a drug to fix it or to compensate for it, and then bringing that to the dog market, which is what we're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it works well with Embark's approach too, where in addition to working with pet owners, we're working with breeders who, in many cases, there are ways that you can try to compensate and prevent some of those, but we're really just starting our learning in some of those complex genetic conditions. So I think there's a lot more to learn there. And it's, there's already those treatments available, like you said, where it's just figuring out how to make them work for the dog and in the pet context. And I actually think Aaron might have something to add here too, with a somewhat different approach that he's taking, but at a very similar end goal.
Yeah, what I saw, like when we look at end of life, palliative care, or even like common disorders, arthritis, they're treated with steroids, painkillers. These are things that really just mask the disease. And we believe that there's an opportunity to use the body's own healing powers, that's the stem cells that you're born with, to actually not just treat these disorders, which there's tons of evidence that it does, but actually to prevent the disorders. So to me, step one is let's treat arthritis with something that addresses the underlying disease, not just the symptoms. And step two is let's prevent arthritis from coming in the first place. And step three is, well, when you start preventing these diseases, what happens? You start living longer. And I think we'll see dogs start adding 1, 2, 3, 4 years of life. And what's personally exciting to me also is that I think when people start seeing their dogs live longer, they're going to be asking for that for themselves. And in a funny way, with stem cell therapy, which is highly regulated by the FDA, we are in a much better place with our pets to do more advanced medicine and kind of do a lot of learnings that are applicable to the human market, which is the opposite of a lot of the trends here, which is things come from humans down to pets. I think what Celine's doing, or Ryan, because she's logged in as Ryan, that there's a really cool future to that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess to give context of how I got into the pet space, I wanted to develop drugs that were looking at an endpoint that was lifespan extension, health span extension, and the prevention or the delay of an age-related disease, which you can't do in people, but you can do it in dogs. That plus like the fact that they're inbred is obviously bad for dogs, but it's kind of good from a drug development standpoint because it means the diseases are actually a little bit simpler from a biological standpoint than they are in people. Yeah. Which means they're a little bit more easier to find a drug that actually hits a pathway that's relevant.
Yeah, exactly. And actually I see we have a question on the Q&A that points to this and gives me an opportunity, and you guys can chime in too, to expand on this, but with basically saying DNA testing doesn't predict disease very well in humans yet. And so, why would we expect it to work for pets for a very long time? And it really is an opportunity to bring an animal model and system in where dogs have been uniquely bred and inbred. Obviously other animals in some cases have been inbred, but uniquely the combination of kind of very strong phenotypic selection or purpose selection, physical selection with very, very strong inbreeding. In many breeds, you're talking about, 30% coefficients of inbreeding. hugely inbred. And when you see that, you actually get, that's why you can say breeds have a very strong predisposition for one kind of cancer or a different kind of cancer, or, you know, a mitral valve disease or these other things, is because, you know, so there's many reasons to think that they're more tractable systems actually in genetics and also, as you say, in treatments and those kinds of areas. Still a lot of work to be done, for no doubt, but I think they have a lot of promise to not just bring that human medicine to pets, but to be able to use them as a system to learn more that can eventually, hopefully, find its way back to human medicine. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but.
No, just that I totally agree. And also, actually in human pharma, you see this a lot, like the golden standard data that you can have when you're trying to pitch a new drug is that there's a human genetic disease where this pathway is modulated and it causes that disease in the person. So then you're able to say, oh, well, in the average person, if you change that pathway with a drug, then you're going to see this. And dogs are like that, but it was for every disease. So it's just very, very cool. And I think you can learn a lot from it for people.
Yep. Zubin, you know, you're working a lot in being able to help pet parents, I think, you know, do more for their pet outside of the vet clinic. So, you know, how do you see the technological developments there eventually perhaps removing the need to actually visit a veterinarian for preventive care?
Yeah, I mean, we get really excited about the work that people like Aaron and Selena are working on this scientific and therapeutic ways of extending life. We think that's groundbreaking. In terms of the work that we're doing, I think we do look to the human healthcare space in some ways, and the data shows that kind of proactive and preventive wellness care leads to a longer lifetime for pets. I think well, we know that in humans, and we certainly know that for pets too. Unfortunately, the one thing, and I think one of the panelists in a previous session mentioned this, but only 60% of cats, maybe 70% of dogs see a veterinarian, and I don't know how frequently that is. So there is a real lack of access. And the thing that we think about, the reason, I'll take a step back, the reason why we think that's interesting and exciting is for two things: friction and frequency, right? And so our platform has provided access to folks to be able to receive veterinary care in-home or acted as a referral for folks to be able to get it at a veterinary care clinic. We also think about telemedicine and telehealth too. And even then, there is still a fair amount of friction that's associated with getting that in-person veterinary care. And then frequency is, if you think about how the commonly accepted calculation around cat and dog years, a cat life for 1 human year, you're thinking about a cat being, it's 6 years in a cat's life and between 7 and 9 years in a dog's life. So if you think about the fact that pets are only really seeing a veterinarian once a year, if that frequently, unfortunately what happens a lot of the time is most veterinarians aren't seeing a pet until a very small problem has been exacerbated to becoming a big problem. And so those infections that are being treated are treated so late, which actually is having an impact on a pet's lifespan. So kind of the way that we think about it is that there are companies like Whistle and Mars with the Pet Insight Project. There are a lot of telehealth offerings that are out there today too. There are a lot of diagnostic tools. And then you're even thinking about vaccines that are being created that do not require a veterinarian to administer that. But I think being in a position where you're able to capture and evaluate data on an ongoing basis rather than at one snapshot once every couple of years will enable the veterinarians and the veterinary profession to be able to more proactively care for pets and enable pet parents to be more conscious around the care that they're providing their pets on an ongoing basis. And I think that in itself will kind of lead to some longevity. And to Aaron's point earlier, I think we'll be able to see 3 to 4 years added on to dogs' lifespans and cat lifespans in a shorter period of time. Hopefully over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, we'll be in a position where we're able to double the lifespan of pets through the therapies that people like Celine and Aaron are working on too.
Yeah, I'm actually curious for all of your perspectives, but I guess I'll start with Aaron, who you know, I'm sure you've thought a lot about this, but as you as we talk about all of these advances, largely preventive advances, particularly for some of us on the panel, how do you see them getting paid for? Do you see any traction with insurance, and would that then raise the premiums? Like how, or is this a top 10% of the market? Does this go mass market? How do these advances, as people, think of their pet more and more like their family and treat them that way, but, also some, a decent section of the market has a limited budget as well.
Yeah, so I mean, our goal was to make stem cell banking, which 5 million humans have done, but it's quite expensive, and to make that more accessible. But still, we're at a price point that is not going to be for everybody. And I think that at a high level, you're talking about really this being for high income people in the short and even medium term. And as much as we can try to get it for more, that's not going to be the reality. Insurance companies aren't going to cover things until there is years of proof points behind it. And so this is going to be people kind of taking it on faith, giving it a shot. It sounds cool. I want the best for my pup. And it's going to be that top chunk. I've talked a lot with some of the insurance companies about covering our stem cell banking services. They won't cover it. It's preventative, it's unproven. Now they'll cover the therapies. They'll all cover the therapies on the back end because there's at least a little bit of data behind it. But it's going to be a long time. And I think this is about wealthy people right now.
I mean, Ben, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked the question. I don't think it's on entrepreneurs like Aaron and Celine to solve that problem. I think that Zubin and I can do a little bit with technology to hopefully increase access to veterinary care. And I think Zubin and Fuzzy are doing a great job of that. But I actually think this is a systemic, and I would argue existential problem for US pet care. Veterinarians aren't paid enough for the services they provide to the society that we operate in. And their debt loads are really crushing, and there are other mental health challenges that I think about a lot. My wife's a therapist, and for anyone who's looked at mental health and veterinary practices, it's a really challenging moment at this time. So those salaries should go up, but there is no employer-backed or government-backed insurance system. I see that as like a grand challenge for all the founders who have weathered through 2 hours of this call. If I could have anyone start a company, and it's not just like a traditional new insurance company, something has to break there for there to be greater access to veterinary care. And Zubin, I'd love your perspective on it too. I know you and I've talked about this before. It's like, that just doesn't work. And I agree, Aaron, near term, that's probably the right answer for his business and should be the answer. But long term, we have to figure out something else that allows greater access to care and not economic euthanasia in the richest country in the history of the world.
Yeah, Ben, I'll jump on that. And actually, there's a question in the Q&A about whether COVID has resulted in an uptick in telehealth services. And I actually think that it's slightly connected to this. There's also a point that says that for most veterinary clinics, they actually haven't seen a decrease in volume of services that they're delivering. But speaking to a lot of practice owners, they have seen a different type of care that they're delivering. So what we're seeing is less preventive care. They're seeing more surgical and emergency care. And the preventive care that folks typically would go into a veterinarian to just seek advice on, they're actually then seeking advice for that through telehealth services. And that's really interesting, because what I see happening over time is that telehealth services will essentially address, for, if you think of the spectrum of care, the most basic needs for a pet parent. And you're then in this realm where actually you're then better leveraging the veterinary community and the veterinary ecosystem in the brick and mortar world to be able to deliver a care that is of higher value and less cost intensive for them to deliver. So what that means is that they're delivering more profit generating activities. And I think that could potentially address for some of the financial issues that Ben mentioned before. And I think what we'll also see is that as folks are getting, with the humanization of pets, what we'll see is that people are becoming more accustomed and comfortable to spending more money on treatments for their pets. And once you've been hit by a $2,500 bill, you're going to be inclined to go out there and get some pet insurance. So I do think that this is going to require a little bit of a perfect storm. There will be some change in the veterinary industry. We'll see folks that are becoming more accustomed to spending more money on their pets' care. And as such, that will lead to an increase in adoption of pet insurance. But outside of that, that may only be incremental growth to what Ben was saying. So there may need to be something that is wildly more innovative that addresses for the problem around paying for vet care services.
Did you have something to say, Celine?
Oh, I was just gonna add, this is something actually we think about a lot, is the kind of the cost and the potential margins of the drug. And I'm a little bit like triggered because we've been thinking about this, especially this week, with like the unit economics of our lead product. And I will say that it makes you make decisions that aren't purely biological or purely with the nature of like, will this work and fix the dog's problem? But you also have to think about the API costs, the active pharmaceutical ingredient and the drug, like how much does that product actually cost to buy? And that plus the formulation cost, plus the, the chunk for the vet, plus the distributor cost, plus, the packaging, plus all that. Does that all play into an amount of money that a dog owner can pay for out of pocket, which is the assumption that at least we've made for the foreseeable future. So it does limit like the scope of drugs that could ever make it to dogs. And you see that, right? Like most dog drugs are small molecules. There's a reason why we haven't, I think the first monoclonal antibody was in 2017. And it partially has to do with that.
Yeah, and I'll jump on that too, because it's something that I've been speaking to a lot of pharmaceutical manufacturers about recently is we've been speaking a lot about an ingestible vaccine that doesn't require a veterinarian to administer it. But if you think about the current pharmaceutical industry, they're so tied to driving interaction with veterinarians that none of the big players are going to be the companies that actually manufacture that ingestible vaccine. There's too much conflict of interest that exists there. So it is going to require new companies like Celine, like Aaron, and like other new pharmaceutical upstarts out there to essentially be driving innovation as relates to vaccines or treatments or therapies.
Going back to Aaron, I was interested, and I bet a lot of people are interested, what are some of the most promising uses now in the short to medium term that you see for stem cell therapies in pets?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so stem cell therapies work for me on an injured back. So I had 2 surgeries and a bunch of other problems, got an injection of stem cells in my discs, and I'm like cured. So for me, it was miraculous. When you look at the evidence for dogs, you see arthritis being a main one. Another one that's extremely common is atopic dermatitis. Basically, it's itchy skin. And you've got 15 million dogs, and it's extremely common. Just as humans are suffering from more allergies, so are dogs. It's almost like the skin is the same as the lungs. It's the same tissue type. And we're looking at intervertebral disc disease, so back stuff just like me, and feline chronic kidney disorder, which is the #1 killer of cats. And we've got clinical trials going in a couple of these now.
Yep. So I'm looking at some of the Q&A that people put. Here's a really interesting one. Maybe Ben can start. Annually, human life science Series A investments top $4 billion. In comparison, 10 million in early stage pet therapeutic investments. I don't know if that number is exactly right, but it's certainly directionally right. So bringing new novel drugs online for pets, even if you're starting from not quite scratch, still is going to cost money. Where's that money coming from?
It takes money to build these companies, yeah. I can tell you kind of lightly, it's much easier to raise money for pet care than when Aaron and I started Whistle and Dog Vacay about a decade ago. So
no doubt.
No one should complain if you're starting the company. It is still a gap in the market, I would say, for overall pet care investment and for novel therapeutics specifically. Obviously, I think Celine and Aaron have been able to, it sounds like, pull off significant fundraising. So I almost would ask whoever that founder is to reach out to them and get their advice. I think you're going to see more and more strategics. We heard from Pumpkin earlier, which has a relationship with a large pharma company, Mars, out there supporting entrepreneurs with all kinds of vehicles, including Companion Fund. But you're going to need financial capital as well as strategics. You're going to need more and more just traditional financial investors to take this bet. And I think just because the dollars are so much bigger in human healthcare, and again, I would defer to Celine and Aaron to build on this, but telling the story that hopefully you do believe that your novel therapeutic for pets will ultimately be able to impact the human market is one way to attract that capital due to the market size at the end state.
I think that's one way to do it, but I do believe that investors are growing more sophisticated about separating those markets. And the animal health market has some advantages. When you do human trials, the average time is about 13, 14 years to get something to market, cost of close to like $100 million. In pets, it's dramatically less. I mean, you can take a drug to market in 3 to 5 years. Your success rate is much higher. The ability to move from phase to phase is much more certain. So while you don't have perhaps as big of a market opportunity, you have, I think, a lower risk and a shorter time to market that some people are starting to now invest in. But agree with you that a lot of investors still say, hey, well, how is this ultimately going to be relevant to humans? I don't think that's necessarily the right question, but it can be.
Yeah, and just as an N of one from me, so I raised my seed in January. Every biotech investor I talked to said, I think this will work, but what the hell, you're selling to pets? Hell no, pass. And every tech VC was like, I'm really confused about the science, but I'll believe you because the pet market is so large. So if you get really good at explaining, if it is a technical backbone to your product, I think it's actually, people were actually really excited about what we were building. And they're really excited about Aaron's company too. And a lot of people told me about your company when I was raising also. So I think now's like kind of the zeitgeist, so to speak, to do something
I'll
like
concur with that, like N of two, because they are excited. Like the consumer guys love pets and they're all about pets. The biotech guys are just starting to open up to it now. I think that's right.
Kicking and screaming.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully we're helping. We raised our Series A with F Prime as our lead investor, who's of course done much more in human health. That's focused there generally. So I think it's been a very interesting experience. They've been super helpful, but we've had to try to work with them to figure out what's applicable for the help and what's not. And until them in our seed round and things, we definitely saw a lot more interest in in more consumer tech investors, and not as much in the biotech guys. All wanted to have conversations, and they were interested, curious, but it was definitely not quite time yet. But I think it seems like it's shifting a bit. So how much more time do we have on the?
I think we got to wrap up here.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Ryan, Aaron, Ben, Celine, Zubin, and a huge thank you to all of the panelists. I think today, we covered so much ground about a lot of the trends facing the future of the pet industry, and that's really what we at Slow are trying to dig into. So if any of you sort of watching or viewing have a pet idea or are trying to start something up, we'd love to chat with you. My email is adam@slow.co. Jill also is jill@slow.co. So feel free to reach out to us directly if there's anything you want to talk about in terms of the pet space. And also just a huge thank you to everyone who viewed today. We really appreciate you coming out. I'll be following up with a survey and then also some of those charities I mentioned at the beginning of the conference in case you want to make a donation. But thanks a ton, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks for organizing it.